All right, let's move on
That's
to
right.
Cincinnati here. Cincinnati is a very interesting one. They started the season terrible. I mean, absolutely dreadful. Before the games even started, Cincinnati had probably the biggest storyline in all of baseball with their owner saying, if you don't like it, you have no other choice. I'm here. The brown paper bags came out. I think they had one of the worst starting seasons of all time. It was bad. They did find a way to come back and kind of resurrect their season, if you will, a little bit. Joey Votto had some injuries, which was unfortunate. He took care of that at the end of the season. Canada's very own. We got to make sure I get a Joey Votto plug in there somehow. However, they did have some fun additions in the offseason. Before I get to the offseason, though, have to talk about they were probably the most active team in trades at the trade deadline. They made a lot of really good futuristic trades for their organization. They got rid of Luis Castillo, which obviously hurts, but the additions they got back were very, very good. They got some really strong packages. They have a very good farm system now, and that is fun to see for a team like Cincinnati, who is in the thick of it, a strong thick of it as a rebuild. I think that it's starting to get burnt edges, if you will, because they've been in the rebuild for so long. It's been cooking for quite some time here, Sean. But they do add a guy like Will Myers coming over for San Diego, who has had some great years in San Diego. He's had some ups and downs as well. I think it was just time for him for a new change of scenery with what San Diego is moving forward to. They get Luke Malley from Cleveland too, which I think could be a really strong piece if everything turns out good. And then they go and trade for some pretty interesting picks who have some youth still, have some potential, and I'm interested in see how they look in the Cincinnati organization. They get Nick Solak for Texas, who have had some good moments. Then now he gets traded for cash considerations. So basically just get him for almost nothing. So there's a really strong no risk in that one. Nick Solak could be really good. And then you get Kevin Newman from Pittsburgh, who I really like. Kevin Newman. I think that could be a really good addition for the Red system. And what I like about that pick is that he's an infielder, shortstop by trade, but it doesn't push their prospects right into the picture right away. It lets them marinate and boil and get ready for what's next. What's your thoughts about Cincinnati as I keep rambling on here about the Reds?
No, not at all. I mean, you gotta do what you can to try and make put lipstick on this this pig here, and I feel bad saying that because the Reds are they're going to be bad again.
They are.
But as you said, they're in the middle of a rebuild here. Right. And I think, as you said, that the additions or the trades that they made in past summer, I think that definitely helps them along the way. What I'm seeing when we talk about all of the things, the players that were brought in, the Nick Solaks, the Kevin Newmans and all of that, those to me scream further rebuild again, another trade deadline. So you collect these resources, hope they work out, so that in July you can continue with that rebuild. You don't bring in a Nick Solak or a Kevin Newman if you have designs on competing, but you also don't bring them down. If you plan on losing 100 games either, right? So I think there's a purpose here.
Fast flips.
I think so. Yeah, and that's certainly what I would do. It's one strategy that I would consider if I were rebuilding a franchise. I would just collect assets and see what I can get for them later on, right? Because you have no expectation. But what I really do like about it, more than that, Christian, is this is a chance now for fans to really get to see young players who are hungry, to establish themselves, right? And yes, a world championship and all of that stuff is why we watch it. And, that's the ultimate celebration. But second to that for me is watching these young guys come up new to baseball and really kind of earn their place. Right. And so if you're a fan of baseball, which let's be real, if you're a fan of the Cincinnati Reds, you love baseball.
That's right.
That's true. This might be the time. That's a really great summer for you.
Yeah, no, I really think you're right. Before we go any farther, if you're a fan of Cincinnati baseball, or if you're not a fan of Cincinnati baseball, if you get the opportunity in your life to go watch opening day in Cincinnati, it is the coolest thing by far. They close schools, they have parades. Like, it's what you wish every MLB team did. They do it in Cincinnati because the tradition and the history, and they really take that to heart. And I think that's why they got so upset about the comments that happened by their owner at the beginning of the season. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, they want to be successful, but even when they're not successful, they still have a pretty decent turnout. At least for opening day, they do, right? At least for
Yeah.
opening day. I like your thoughts there, especially about a guy like Kevin Newman. I mean, yes, for Nick Solak, if you get cash considerations, if he does great and you can find a way to trade him for maybe an arm or something in the future, awesome. Maybe he can be a nice role player on a playoff team, maybe like a Daniel Vogelback kind of guy that happened with the Mets last year, right? But I really like the idea of Kevin Newman maybe being, pushing himself to be a guy that can take off and get traded for maybe a little package of a prospect or two. Because, yeah, he, like I said earlier, he's a shortstop by trade, but you have what, 2-3 shortstops? I'm pretty sure their top 3 prospects in the system all have shortstop next to their name. Now, Dela Cruz can play a third base as well. He's considered the number 1 prospect, but Marte and Arroyo are both shortstops also by trade. So there's no way that you say that Kevin Newman is the future for the Cincinnati Reds. So I love the idea of saying that he's probably on the move as well. So we're probably going to see maybe a half season out of Kevin Newman, and I'm completely okay with that, because I wouldn't be surprised if we saw De La Cruz or Marte in the Cincinnati organization in the major league level this year. MLB Pipeline does say their ETA is 2023 this year, and I completely agree. I think we're going to see at least one of them. These are some of those guys that we saw from these big trades in the trade deadline. They rebuilt their farm system, and their farm system is really good. In the draft, they got Cam Collier, who was, they got him, I think, he fell right to them, and they did a really good job in the draft as well. They weren't afraid to sign some money for him. Cam Collier immediately moves up to their 4th prospect in the system. He's going to be a couple of years to marinate, but when he comes up, I'm really looking forward to seeing him. If you paid attention to college baseball at all last season, but they have some really good prospects, and we're not going to dig too much into prospects with some of these teams, but this is a team that you really got to pay attention to, because I think we're going to be talking about their top prospects like we talked about the Orioles' top prospects for the next couple of years, like how we talked about Grayson Rodriguez, how we talked about Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson. I think we're going to talk about the Cincinnati Red prospects this year like we did with Baltimore, Sean.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. If you're a Cincinnati Reds baseball fan, what you're watching for this year, you're actually watching for 2 or 3 years from now. Like that, it's just to kind of get used to these guys and see what they can do, and let them, the young kids play and all of that stuff. And what you're seeing on the field this year in 2023 from the Reds may not be there. Looking around the diamond at the Kevin Newmans and all of that stuff, like even the Spencer Steer, who's, projected to start at third base, who doesn't have the traditional power of a third baseman. This is what happens in the context of the Red season, right? You're going to get guys who aren't necessarily prototypical at different positions, but you're going to let the young kids play, because in a few years, you're going to be good, right? And that's what Cincinnati Reds fans have to look forward to this year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to actually watching Cincinnati Reds baseball this year, because there is going to be a lot of great storylines. About the Will Myers thing, we kind of talked about Kevin Newman a little bit. Is he a guy that will be flipped, or is he a guy that comes in strictly for the veteran leadership for this squad?
Man, that's a great question. I wish I knew why they signed Will Myers, to be honest with you. Ever since he I believe he was Rookie of the Year with Tampa Bay. I remember his big old hairdo. Yeah. Yeah, the whole thing.
Guy. That's all I remember, is that he always, no gloves, and that's to keep in mind. But
he looked like a big stoner during his interview. Like that's all that's all I really remember. And then he goes out to San Diego and kind of disappears as far as baseball relevancy goes. A la Eric Hinsky, Blue Jays Rookie of the Year in 2003, I believe. My years may be off, but again, solid breakthrough, and then kind of off the cliff. So what is Will Myers for the Cincinnati Reds? He's a name. Let's be real. He's a name. He's gonna draw some interest. He may, if he can kind of find his performance and whatnot, maybe he's a flip candidate. But at the end of the day, too, even though a team is rebuilding, they still need position players, and they still need players to play the game, right? So, to me, if Will Myers is not flippable, I'll just make up words now, if that's okay.
If he's not flippable,
it's okay. It's okay. It's the OK
Yeah,
Baseball podcast, so it's going to have to be.
it's okay.
But yeah, no, I think if he's not flippable, then it's just let's get somebody who can play first base and some outfield, because Joey Votto, not getting younger, does get hurt. It's not like they're not going to need a first baseman.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Very good point. And
Yeah.
you do need some sort of veteran leadership, even, a good transition, if you will, too, even if we find out sooner or later that it's going to be Joey Votto's last year, because we know that's coming around the corner at some point. That's going to be such a bittersweet moment when that happens. All right, last question on the Reds here. We already talked about their prospects. We talked about some of their additions, and we know that they're not going to be a great team this year. But do you feel like they are in the right direction as a franchise, and can they find themselves not in the basement once the season is over of the NL Central?
Yeah, I actually do think they are headed in the right direction. And then, like as you said, the trade deadline and stuff went a long way to that. Absolutely, it did. But one thing I really like, and the reason I think I'll be following the Reds more closely than I have been, is their starting rotation with Lodolo and Green. Those are two guys who, man, they are going to be good. And that's not an insignificant place to start if you're in a rebuild. So for me, their starting rotation is something that I would be excited about if I were a Reds fan, for sure.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I'm looking really forward to this one. And obviously, if you need a good game to watch on opening day, you can always check out the festivities from Cincinnati.